Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Cian and I'm a Knowledge Transfer and Exchange Associate with the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. And I will be the moderator for this session today on coping with social isolation and dementia in and beyond pandemics. So just a few housekeeping items before we begin. The webinar today is being offered in English and French. So to select a language, click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Please also note that poll questions will come up throughout the webinar, so we appreciate you answering these questions. Today's webinar is being recorded, but only the video and the audio of the panelist and moderator is captured during the recording. The webinar is a panel discussion, and there will be a question and answer session at the end to address any questions or comments that you may have. So please enter your questions and comments that you have into the chat box. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada acknowledges that our offices are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas, and the Chippewa bands. Given that we work in the dementia space, we also want to acknowledge some of the great work that Indigenous peoples and organizations are doing around dementia. We encourage you to read the Native Women's Association of Canada's Dementia Toolkit and the Dementia Storybook. We also urge you to visit the website of the Anishinaabe Dementia Care. We think all professionals in the dementia space should know about the Canadian Indigenous Cognitive Assessment, which is available at icare.ca. Last but not least, we encourage you to look at webinars and documents about dementia that continue to be developed by the National Collaborating Centre for Indigenous Health. And my colleagues will add the websites of these organizations in our Zoom chat for you to use, share, support, and learn from. So this is our 6th event for the new webinar series, Dementia Talks Canada. So it's presented by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada in partnership with Brain Canada. The purpose of Dementia Talks Canada is to bring up the most up-to-date and relevant dementia research and topics to people who are affected by dementia in Canada in ways that are both practical and can be applied to their everyday lives. Alzheimer's Society of Canada is a leading nationwide health charity for people living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Active in communities across Canada, the Society provides information, programs, and services to those living with a diagnosis and their caregivers. The Alzheimer's Society Research Program is Canada's leading funder of research into better understanding the causes of dementia, improving treatment and care, and towards finding a cure. Brain Canada provides a unique and valuable role as a national convener of the community of those who support and advance brain research. A greater understanding of how the brain works will contribute to the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and cure of disorders of the brain, thereby improving the health outcomes of Canadians. Brain Canada's main areas of focus are fundraising, granting, and strengthening the brain research community. Each month, Dementia Talks Canada will feature a conversation on a topic related to dementia, involving people who have direct firsthand experience. And as already mentioned, the topic today is coping with social isolation and dementia in and beyond pandemics. And we have 5 individuals who have unique perspectives and knowledge regarding this topic. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Deborah Sheets. Dr. Sheets is a professor in the School of Nursing at the University of Victoria and a research affiliate with the Institute on Aging and Lifelong Health. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Brenda Brophy is a daughter and dedicated advocate for the rights of seniors. She has dealt with home care, long-term care, visitation restrictions during the pandemic, and challenges around caring for a parent living with dementia at home. Although her mom passed away last July, she continues to reflect on the experience and finds ways to lend support to others facing similar challenges. So welcome, Brenda, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Rena and David Chase currently live in Sydney, BC, and have raised 4 children during their 56 years together. Before retirement, David was a teacher and Rena was a social worker. And 6 years ago, Rena was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. Both Rena and David have also recently participated in the Voices in Motion choir during the pandemic lockdown. So welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
John Hamill has been happily married for 30 years and lives in London, Ontario with his wife and their beloved dog, Punky. For 26 years, John worked as an insurance broker, constantly driving across Southern Ontario, interacting and socializing with clients. 6 years ago, he started to notice changes in his health and sought medical attention. So fast forward 2 years and he was diagnosed with early onset dementia, forcing him to retire. So welcome, John, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me in the group.
So let's get started. We're going to be starting the panel discussion now. So starting with Dr. Sheets, how common is social isolation among people living with dementia?
It's great to provide a little bit of background on this. It's estimated that about 1 out of 3 adults age 45 and older feel lonely, and about 1/4 of adults age 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. Loneliness is the subjective feeling that you don't have the connections and social relationships that you want, whereas social isolation really has to do with the number of social connections that you have. So they're intertwined, but they're quite distinct they're quite distinct concepts. And they're important because they have such a significant impact on people's well-being, quality of life, and health in particular. It's quite widespread, I think, social isolation and loneliness. In fact, in England, they've appointed a minister of loneliness now, who's attempting to address this through a wide range of different approaches, because there are many factors that contribute to this. I mean, older adults in general tend to get more socially isolated as they get older and they're not able to drive, or their spouse dies. Social circles can get smaller. So it's a very common problem and more recognized for the impact it has on people's health and well-being and quality of life.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Sheets. I think a lot of the times people don't always realize there is a sort of a difference between social isolation and loneliness, and we kind of consider it the same thing. So thank you for that. Brenda, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience when you were caring for your mom during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom had been in long-term care since 2017, and when she'd moved into care, I made sure she was close to where I live so that I could be there every day, most days anyways. My mom and I were incredibly close, and I used to be there and play music with her and games. We played crib together, jigsaw puzzles, lots of interaction. My mom's dementia, in her situation, she had a real lack of any short-term memory, but in the moment people wouldn't even realize there was anything wrong. She was very happy, very positive. When the pandemic hit, I was able to explain to her what was about to happen. So March 16th, 2020, for many of us, is a day that we'll never forget. For myself, it was the last time that I saw my mom until July. With the caregivers, I was able to set up regular Zoom calls, but as staff burnt out and casual staff came on in long-term care, those became less and less. I was unsuccessful at requesting to be an essential visitor for my mom. So I went long periods of time where I wasn't able to even get information on how she was. If I would phone her, and my mom's typical style, she would say everything was fine, but I knew that she was left in bed all day in her room. And my mom was a very, not necessarily solitary, but my mom was very independent, and she didn't have massive social circles, and that was okay for her. So she oftentimes, if they asked her if she wanted to do things or go out, she would say, very lovely and very sweetly that she was fine. But the flip side of that is she was just left in bed all day, and to her own detriment, her cognitive abilities started to decline. By the time that I was able to see my mom for the first time in, I believe it was July 10th, over Zoom calls and phoning her, I didn't realize she seemed like she was not doing too bad, very positive attitude still. But when I saw her, there was a change in her eyes. Her eyes didn't have the same sparkle and personality that they had before. And she had lost a massive amount of weight. She was about 65 pounds. So she dropped about 20 pounds in that period of time. She just wasn't eating anymore. And so for awareness, my mom didn't really care for the food in long-term care, but I happily provided her with meals all the time, right? All the years that she was in there, and I wasn't able to do that when the pandemic hit. So for her, the isolation immediately caused a decline, not only in her physical health, but in her cognitive health as well. So through lots of different scenarios and issues that happened through that summer, ending with a fall, My mom, I had a call the next day after she'd had a bad fall, and they let me go in every day as an essential visitor, and I took food. And by the end of 7 days, my mom was her old self again. She was eating, she was happy, she was playing solitaire, we were doing jigsaw puzzles. And because she was doing so well, the facility that she was in decided that she didn't need an essential visitor anymore, and I was locked out again. So this started this spiral of trying to fight the bureaucracy, the long-term care facility, trying to lodge complaints and all that. And on September 23rd, 2020, my husband and I moved her into our home. We, in very short order after her fall, had managed to set up a room, got all the equipment we needed. We didn't even have help at that point. I managed to find a retired caregiver that we knew that came in and helped us. And then luckily after that, we did get some more help. We had a student nurse that we brought on board, and we had 10.5 months of my mom living at home with us. The joy, the laughter, the moments that we had, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world, but they were also not without incredible stress and sorrow. My mom had declined incredibly, and I had gerontologists along the way that always told me it was unlikely my mom would ever forget who I was. And that wasn't the case. When the sundowning started in the afternoons, my mom would have, I knew she would stare at me and she would say, "Thank you very much," when I brought her food. And I knew that she didn't realize who I was. She thought I was a care aide in a facility at that point. So the experience is one that I wouldn't trade for anything, but it was also a manifestation of all the issues through the pandemic and how we treated seniors in long-term care, and not simply allowing their family members that are always taking care of them to have, reasonable access to care for them in their facilities where others weren't able to do so. And, so the experience it was poignant, it was incredible, but it was stressful and heartbreaking all at the same time.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Brenda. It really highlights for me some of the, it's great to have these virtual technology to be able to connect with people, but the in-person is, always seem to be better if you can have that. So it really highlights that point for me. So moving on for some questions for either John or David or Rena. Does living with dementia make you feel socially isolated? And if so, can you explain how that might be?
I'll go first. What my thoughts on the subject about social isolation, especially during the pandemic. Actually, I kind of liked it. I've been in different groups where we've discussed this before. And what the consensus was, and it was mine as well, is we actually liked it. The reason is because with dementia, your world kind of gets smaller as the dementia progresses, and too much activity just overwhelms the brain and overwhelms us. So actually able to kind of do our own thing, stay at home, do our own activities was actually a really good thing. So not seeing people wasn't so bad, as long as you had activities to kind of keep you busy, keep your mind occupied, and you're able to continue.
Thank you, John. David or Rena, do you have anything to add to that?
Isolation. Well, the one thing that I have really learned in terms of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease is that you can quickly become isolated with other people. And what I've had to do is I've kind of had to barge myself into a place where I could actually sing and dance and do the things I love to do.
That sounds wonderful.
We're in a transition stage now. We lived on a small island in the Gulf Islands. And during the pandemic, as with everyone else, there was the mandated social isolation. But one thing we did have was walks around about a 3-kilometer loop where we would often see other people on the other side of the road or in passing. And that felt like, moments of connecting. We were in communication with family through telephone, basically, and also Facebook messaging and that sort of thing. So I think we talked about being isolated and certainly experienced isolation, but at the same time, Although we were missing a lot of things in our lives, we had each other and friends that we would see with social distancing.
Mhm. Yeah.
That was good that you were able to at least find some small ways to connect with others.
Yeah.
So back to Dr. Sheets, I know you touched a little bit on how social isolation for people living with dementia is a public health concern. I wondered if you had any more to that, or why a person living with dementia is it such a higher risk for social isolation?
Thank you so much, Sian. Yeah, I think people in general with memory loss, with dementia, are at much higher risk for social isolation because there's so much stigma that comes with being diagnosed with dementia. Friends drop away. They don't want to hear a story repeated. There's just a stigma that tends to attach to both the caregiver and the person living with memory loss, and that can really narrow that circle of friends. Now, the problem with this is that social isolation really increases your risk of premature death from all causes. It's associated with a 50% increased risk of dementia, which is kind of ironic if you already have memory loss. And poor social relationships are associated with increased heart disease, increased stroke, higher rates of depression, anxiety, and a 68% increased risk of hospitalization, 57% increased risk of emergency. So it has significant impacts on health all across the board. John's absolutely right about saying that, sometimes it can be a blessing not to have as much going on if you've got memory loss, because it can be like overload. But on the other hand, people have a natural tendency to withdraw also when they have memory loss. And that can lead to, again, this social isolation, which is kind of inadvertent. So we are social beings and we really need to maintain social connections. And it's sometimes hard to figure out how to do that when you're living in the community, because there aren't enough community-based, I would say, dementia inclusive programs where people with memory loss feel like they're being included, accommodations are being made, it's a safe space, those kinds of things. So it's really, really important, since there is no cure for Alzheimer's or memory loss, that we need to have these kinds of programs available, because we want to offset this impact on health, and there is no cure, and they can really make a significant difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Can I
Sheets.
comment on that?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I always like to kind of give the flip side to it on that of what you said about the social isolation. The good part I did like about it, I was able to keep myself busy. The reason is I didn't want to go on out. Maybe that has to do with the apathy of the dementia, where I didn't have that oomph. And I know that changed even this year, where it's even gotten worse, where I can't go on out and just go. And that's where I found it great, just doing some of the things I can do, whether it's go on these Zoom meetings or just doing hobbies and crafts and activities like that, even for just a couple hours a day. That filled the gap, and it was great. And I didn't miss that, mainly because of the memory loss. It's like out of sight, out of mind. So I didn't miss it at all.
That's
It
fantastic.
sounds like you were definitely able to adapt quite well, John. So that's great. So back to Brenda. So it sounds like you did some great advocacy for your mom when she was living in long-term care. Do you have any advice for other caregivers on how they can advocate, especially when their their family member or friend is living in long-term care and they may be at risk for social isolation?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, you have so many layers. You're dealing with the long-term care facilities, the staffing levels, all of the issues that anybody that's dealt with long-term care or home care, and I don't believe it makes a lot of difference what province you're in. There's systemic issues everywhere, and what I found by and large is that the people that work in long-term care are angels. I mean, they do an incredibly difficult job, and by and large, most of them are trying to do the best they can. But oftentimes there's issues around staffing and everything else. So the thing that gets sort of put on the back burner or shelved is those social programs. And there just isn't enough. My mom was somebody who was very active in the community. She did programs, she volunteered probably 4 out of 5 days of the week, she was down at her community hall, whether it was carpet bowling or shuffleboard or, helping others. She was always busy and active until that wasn't as safe for her to do. And then she was in adult programs for those with dementia when she was still able to live on her own. So she was very social, very engaged. And for the first couple of years in long-term care, a lot of that continued. It certainly slowed down though, because they didn't have the same level of activity. So myself being very involved with my mom, we were very close. I could keep a real eye on things, and I had the activity schedule. I would call and remind her, make sure you get down to bingo or whatever it was. So, for those fortunate enough to live close to their loved one or have some ability to reach out to the facility, just get really involved. Don't walk away and think that because your person has dementia or they might be forgetting who you are or repeating things or all those behaviors that come with that disease or condition, don't think that they're not still in there. They are very much in there. Even in the days where I knew that my mom didn't recognize me, it was soul crushing for me, but my mom was still my mom and I had to put my feelings aside. So to stay connected and know that you can still impact and make a difference. I met Deborah first through the Voices in Motion choir, thanks to my husband who saw an article in the paper when that choir was starting, and I reached out, went to the first concert and took my mom. So at that point, she was living here in long-term care near me. And we immediately joined the choir, and those were some of the best times that I can remember with my mom. We had so much fun. And through happenstance or whatever you want to call it, there was an evening with her older sister, who I might add to is 104 as of this last July and does not have dementia. She's still with us. We got playing old music one evening and my mom lit up like a Christmas tree. And I've got all these beautiful videos of her and her older sister singing songs that I'd never heard of. And they kept thinking of new ones. So my cousin and I were madly jotting down the names of these songs, and thanks to the magic of technology and Spotify, I found them all. And I had a playlist for my mom. And what used to be annoying trips to the doctor, because my mom would keep repeating, where are we going? What are we doing? And I would start to lose patience, as you do when you're working full time and caring for an elder with dementia. I'd put the music on and we would sing all the way to the doctor's appointment and laugh and had so much fun. And it was that moment of awareness and through the choir and that just that evening that organically grew out of just somebody humming the line of a song with her older sister, I found out that music was the connection that my mom and I needed. So from that moment on, we had, by the time that my mom passed away, the playlist was 4 hours and 52 minutes long, because she went into palliative care in the hospital and I slept and was in that room for 12 days at the end of her life. And those songs played around the clock. And even in the end where my mom wasn't responding, her toes were tapping. My husband would come in and sing a little song that we called their song. And my mom we would watch and her fingers would move and her toes would tap. So right up until the moment that she took her last breath, music was the connection that we had. And I don't like talking about my mom without showing a picture. So this is my happy little mama after she moved in with us. And she was joyful and she was happy and she had those connections again. Her 101st birthday was spent on the back deck with her caregivers and all of us outside with the masks on. And an example of this, she went from being in long-term care. First time in my life I'd ever seen my mom depressed. She wasn't engaging anymore. She just seemed like a shell of her former self. We moved her home, and that was September. Her birthday was April 5th. 2021, and we had a big party for her out on the deck, and that was a neighbor and her caregivers, my husband and myself, and she was on fire from the moment I got her up and got her dressed. Deborah and folks from UVic had sent balloons, the house filled with flowers and presents from people dropping things off. And there's a beautiful recording that I did that was shared in our podcast, where I tucked her into bed that night and we talked about the day that she'd had, and she talked about how great it was. And then I said, you were important. And she goes, I was the most important. And she was just absolutely engaged. There was no sign that my mom even had dementia that day, but it was like her brain was firing because she'd had all this stimulation. Now she was exhausted for the next few days, but it was really an awareness for me that the person is still there and they need to be stimulated and they need engagement. And that day was one of the brightest days that we had. And it was a reminder to me. So we continuously had games and music and made sure that those connections, and when somebody's in long-term care, you just need to understand that that's not happening all day long. They do the best that they can, but that is not the priority. It's feeding, bathing, all of the tasks, but it's not the social games, connections, music. And there's only so many volunteers and so many people that can do those kind of things. So the more you can educate yourself, the more resources you can call on. Reach out. Alzheimer's Society was my first point of contact in 2012 when my mom was diagnosed. And those workshops were phenomenal. I always say when I'm involved in anything with the Alzheimer's Society is that was really a turning point for me in accepting my mom's diagnosis and understanding that I could do something about it, educate myself and take care of my mom as best I could. And so that's what I would say to do is just make sure that you connect and stay involved with wherever that facility is and whatever's going on for your person, and don't break those connections.
Those are great tips. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you for sharing those special stories about your mom there. Very sweet to hear. So for David, Rena, or John, you mentioned a couple of things already that of things that keep you socially engaged. Just wondering if you had any other experiences you'd like to share of how you keep social or how you keep busy.
Yes, well, I'll speak first, if that's okay. During the pandemic, the choir we'd been attending on Main Island came to an end. And after the pandemic, it didn't start up again. And we were missing our involvement with a social choir. We sang to each other in the house, but that's not the same. And Rena was doing some search online and came across the Voices in Motion. I think it was on a UVic webpage. And so we explored that about a year ago. And that just filled the notch really well. And it was such an accepting, vibrant community, wonderful music, wonderful direction, and research-based that really made us feel confident to be with such a friendly, rewarding group. So that was a major thing that really helped us along. And on the side, we do a little bit of African drumming and a lot of walking, that sort of thing. So,
Guess what?
I'm just gonna shut this phone off.
Okay. Some of the things that that keep me socially engaged are actually the Zoom meetings. What has changed since COVID is a lot of the
calendar.
The Circle of Friends has now been on Zoom now, which is Alzheimer's Society in London, where the persons with dementia get together and kind of chat and kind of get together. We used to have that in person prior to COVID. Now it's gone on Zoom. The great part about it being on Zoom is everybody can't get out, whether because you may not be able to drive anymore, and having it on Zoom is great, or that apathy where you don't have the initiative to go out. So this is where Zoom has really helped to keep socially engaged, and different activities and other programs like helping out. I helped out with Cian with the Bias Forest Guides. Little things like that really help kind of get through the pandemic and keep you socially engaged and meet other people with dementia and are going down the same path.
That sounds great, Johnny. I'm not sure that I would ever get to meet you if I hadn't worked with you on that project. So exactly, I feel the same way. So going back to Dr. Sheets, can you share with us a little bit more information about the work that you're doing related to social isolation and dementia in the pandemic, and what things we can do to address social isolation for people living with dementia and their caregivers?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I want to thank the Alzheimer's Society of Canada for funding the initial work that was done to launch the Voices in Motion Choir, which is an intergenerational choir for people living with memory loss and their family care partners. And we partnered with high schools It started in 2018 and ran for 2 years, then became a nonprofit and is now a charity. We had 6 choirs before the pandemic, and now we're down to 2. So we've hung together through different tailgate parties and stuff through the pandemic, singing online on Zoom, although it wasn't ideal. People are really happy to be in the same shared space again. So the choir is doing well. And during the pandemic, I switched my attention to starting some memory cafes. And my idea of a memory cafe was not to meet once a month for education and support, but again, to bring in care partners with their family member who has memory loss and provide an arts and social recreational experience that was high quality. The choir, for example, was not a sing-along. It was about bringing in a professional choir director and singing in 3 to 4 part harmonies. And my memory cafe was similarly, I brought in professionals to lead different arts activities like drumming, which David and Rena were involved in that and very good at drumming, bringing in people to lead painting, and we brought in someone last week who helped us create a dance poem, a professional dancer who did kind of an improv thing. It was amazing. It was so much fun, and we were all laughing. And I think it's so important for the dyads, or the duets as we call them in the choir, but both family members. Like, the program is not about respite. It's about stepping out of that care partner role and really having fun together, refocusing on the relationship, meeting others who understand your situation, and having a very safe space where everybody has fun and remembering, what it's like to just kind of normalize your life again, because you are not your memory loss. It's about, you are so much more than having a few word finding difficulties. And we try to provide ways to give people a new way to express themselves. So it's very much about using the arts to create a new language and to connect with other people in that way. And I'm really excited by the potential of the arts to help people discover and focus on the strengths in themselves, rather than, I can't find the right words, or I can't remember this from yesterday. And that helps the care partners too connect with the person they're caring for. We're role modeling new ways to communicate, to hear the stories that are there. There are lots of different approaches in the arts that I think are so invaluable. We have a dementia strategy in Canada that was launched in 2019. And I guess my disappointment at this point, 3 years later, is that a lot of funding has been provided to try to create more. They're using the word dementia friendly. I would use dementia informed approaches. And much of that work to this point has really focused on, educating firefighters and police and postal workers and, healthcare workers. And that's very important work. But there's really no funding. I mean, my programs run on a shoestring. I piece them together. I try to find local support, Rotary clubs, whatever. And I have to make participants pay a fee, which is okay. I try to keep it really low. But there's no support for these community-based programs, which are so important, I think, to helping support the person with memory loss and their care partner to continue providing care. I mean, with the choir project, we found that it reduced the rate of cognitive decline by about half of what would be expected normally. About half. That's better than any pill you can buy, and a lot cheaper. It doesn't cost $10,000 a year. And why was it? It wasn't because we were changing the disease itself. It was because the impact of stigma, when you feel stigma, when you are socially isolated, when you feel anxious, your brain doesn't function as well. So by providing a place where people could relax, have fun, realize I can learn new things, I can learn words to songs, I can participate, I can contribute to something meaningful, it makes all the difference. We also saw reduced rates of caregiver distress, depression in both the caregiver and the person with memory loss. These are really, really important findings, and they point to the importance of community-based programs, and yet there are so few. Here in Victoria, we really have 3. We have the Voices in Motion Choir, we have the Memory Cafe, both of which I've started, and we have Minds in Motion, which is under the auspices of the Alzheimer's Society. But those are the 3 real places where you can feel a sense of support in the community that isn't about education or about respite. They're quite different programs from the types of supports that are out there. And I think the arts really are invaluable. They give richness and meaning to life. So that's my plug for more of these kinds of programs, because they really do promote social connections, and they just lift everyone up in the process, and they don't have to be super expensive. They're about bringing joy back into people's lives and helping them again to normalize, like, this doesn't have to be viewed as a problem. You can still connect with people. There are other ways to communicate. Thank you.
I was also interested, Dr. Sheets, to see your podcast series. Can you talk just a little bit about what that series was about and how successful that was?
Oh, the podcast series. Yes. So during the pandemic, Brenda was a participant in that. And if you want to hear a lovely episode, the Call to Mind podcast can be found on any podcasting site, iTunes and others. There's also a website, calltomindpodcast.com. And we gave support to care partners to go out and just do some recordings with their family member. And then we had them professionally edited, and really found some amazing intimate stories that gave the care partner a voice and gave people a glimpse into what it's like to be a care partner. Often the focus in the media is on, oh, it's so hard being a care partner, but there are also joys along with some of those challenges, and some really poignant, intimate moments that I think are so important to capture. And there are other podcasts out there, but most of them focus again on education, on what do you need to know to be a care partner. How often we haven't heard the voice of the care partners themselves telling their story in conjunction with their family member. And so it's lovely. I've created a training manual, and we're going to be testing that, but I'm hoping to inspire other care partners to begin taping some of those moments with their family member, with their consent, of course. And just having that, I wish I had some recordings of myself talking and interacting with my dad. You can still hear someone's voice after they're gone. And Brenda can probably speak to that, like with the podcast, it took a long time for her to listen to it.
It was months. I was scared too, but it was, now I feel like to get emotional thinking about it. But when I want to, I still have lots of recordings I can listen to, but when I want to listen to something and have a moment with my mom, I'll listen to the podcast, because it's just put together in such a way that it weaves our story. And it certainly reminds me of some of the rough times, but it definitely brings back the joy in caring for her in those really important moments. So yeah, that's one thing I would definitely say, if you're taking care of someone, or even not, maybe just visiting, record them and have those conversations. Later on, you're gonna find great comfort and joy in them when you're able to listen when you've lost them in real time.
The thing I'd say too about community programs and about the podcast is that I gave a talk recently, and the members were mostly older, and they said to me afterwards, we hate talks on aging and on older adults because so often, it's so depressing. And your talk left me uplifted, because it was about things like the choir, about Brenda's mom singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning," about how you can age well. And we can all do that and learn
About that.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
Yeah, my mom sang all day long. It started with, "Oh, what a beautiful morning." And every night, as I sat on her bed, we ended the day with "You Are My Sunshine" every single day for those 10 and a half months. So
Yeah.
Incredible way to connect with your mom. Thank you.
Thank you both. So Dr. Sheets, you spoke a little bit about the importance of people having access to different, social, recreational, and arts activities. I wanted to get back with David, Arena, and John to see what are your thoughts on the importance of having access to things like the choir and lots of other activities going on in your community.
Yeah. I would say it's paramount to living a happy life, being connected socially, and particularly in the arts, as Deborah was mentioning. And I'll just give one quick little example. I think I have Rena's permission. She can hit me if I don't. We were in a coffee shop the other day, and Rena loves to sing, and something reminded her of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" when we were at the cashier's paying for our bill. And she started to sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And the cashier was a lovely young fellow who just joined right in. And they sang all the way through. And there's probably about 10 people in this little cafe, but it was just a delightful moment to see people coming together with music. And there was no stigma, there was nothing weird about it. It was just a joyful moment. And I still chuckle every time I have that picture in my mind.
So it's Rena right now, and just to tell you, there's been some wonderful opportunities to be with people who are very caring and whatnot, and to be isolated against all of those things is a very difficult thing. But when you have somebody to sing with, that makes all the difference. Yeah.
I'm going to throw a different angle at this. One thing I really missed, and I'm pushing to come back again, is actually Artful Minds that they used to have here in Alzheimer's Society in London. And when the pandemic hit, that ended the Artful Minds. And that was one of the favorite programs, not just by me, but a lot of other ones experiencing dementia. So we were kind of sad that it's gone. But I'm really pushing to get it back because I'm on the committee at Alzheimer's London anyway. But also, I want to kind of tell a story about I started going to the day program at McCormick Home here in London. So one thing I said when I started there is I want to do arts and crafts to keep myself busy. I'm just not a person to sit there and listen to the music coming in. I got to keep busy. Yeah, I just can't sit down and just listen. So I said, I want to do arts and crafts. So they started doing that. And one thing I did, like yesterday, I was at the day program. I cut wood cookies on the weekend. And actually they took their pictures, printed them all out that are at the day program, and I put their pictures all on the wood cookies. So, and they really look good. And that was my kind of activity for yesterday. But yeah, it's kind of doing things that you still can do. I find doing arts and crafts, keep it down to like 3 steps that you need to do, because after that it just gets confusing. So keep doing the things you can do, the things you can enjoy doing. And even programs at the adult day programs, get them to do things you want to do, because they will implement them, and that's very important. Also, I want to talk about the music, because this is what also happened at McCormick Home. I love music too, so I understand, Brenda, where your mother is coming from. I got 10,000 songs on my iPhone that I love listening to. So one thing I did is at noon, the recreational staff go and have their lunch. So I said, I don't want to listen to that same track they've been playing for the last 4 weeks. It's on a loop. And I said, no, I got to change this. So what I did was implemented an all request lunchtime. So what I did is I go and I changed the music on the computer to any request they had. And it's funny how they want to listen to 70s music. They don't want to listen to stuff from the 40s and 50s. No, the majority of stuff they want to listen to stuff from the 70s. So I take requests, go onto the YouTube and type them in. And everybody's happy this way because everybody gets to pick a song that they want to hear. And hey, it makes for a happier lunch hour. So I guess this is some of the things that I try to push. I guess push for what you want, even when you do have dementia. And no matter where you're at, whether it's programs through the Alzheimer's Society, at the Adult Day program, or even other things that's out there in the community, ask for what you get, what you want. And who knows, you might end up getting it. And it's all good.
That's great advice. Thanks, John. Dr. Sheets, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, John. People being able to have choice. But I think also, like, it's not about listening. It's about participating in life. It's about engaging with the music, creating music, whether it's like Rena doing her drumming. You know, she doesn't want to just sit and listen to things and kind of be a bystander, but to be kind of in there, contributing, creating something beautiful, surprising herself with what happens. And you too, like, arts and crafts are good, but what if you actually had a professional artist come in and help you create something that you wanted to paint? It doesn't have to be that complicated. but to actually feel like you're learning something and not just filling time, but creating something that might surprise you and surprise others as well. And I think that's where the choir helps reduce stigma in particular, because we do public concerts at the end of each season, and people come in, families are often surprised at how good the choir sounds, at the quality of the choir, because hearing a professionally directed choir is quite different even than a sing-along. And I really think that people deserve high quality programs. And it's not about therapy. It's not music therapy. It's not art therapy. It has therapeutic impacts, no doubt. And Rena would really appreciate this coming from a social work background. But the goal is not to medicalize things. It's to create, to use a social model that really fosters connections and interactions and engagement. The high school students were so important in the choir program in particular, because they learned not to be afraid of memory loss. They learned how to communicate with older adults in general, but they needed support to do that. We kind of had to coach them through a bit and give them a question of the week to interact with. So all those things are important to creating a community, a caring community. And the choir in particular, when people sing together, it's very different than singing alone. Like, you might be home singing alone. You don't produce the same oxytocin, the chemicals that help you bond with other people. When you're in the room with people and you're singing and you can hear other parts, or if you're like David and Rena and I were doing this dance poem the other day with a whole group of people, different things are happening with your neurochemicals in your body, and it's very positive. And when I was doing my memory cafe online, it was much harder to engage people, so much harder, because we're all just sitting staring at the screen and trying to create a story together or to do different things. But I'm so happy now that we can actually meet in person, have coffee, engage in something that's really fun, get up and jump around a bit, and in the end leave feeling really energized and just happy to be there.
Can I comment on that also?
Sure, John. Yeah.
Two things I've kind of found with that about bringing in a person for art and that. At McCormick Home, they did have a person that did arts and crafts and that, and she left and she was never replaced. Same with that Alzheimer's Society. They had the Artful Minds. She retired, was never replaced. And sometimes it's also the funding, because they would have to hire somebody to come on in, and the funding's not always there. So they've run into a couple of challenges to run into help with some of that activities. But I totally agree with you on all of that. But that's how the other flip side of what I found here.
I want to just make a plug. The arts are not viewed as essential to people the way that other programs are, like respite or health. That's because it can become very medicalized. I think we need these social models when we're thinking about programs. And yeah, it just really, they're the ones that really have an impact. And although other types of programs matter also, the first things to get cut are the arts, aren't they? And high quality arts. Like, I'm not talking about recreational therapy programs where a recreational therapist comes in and leads you through bingo or leads you through different activities that fill the day. I'm really talking about the opportunity to learn and to try something new and to develop an identity as a singer or as an artist or as a dancer, whatever it is. It's something different for many people, but you're learning to express yourself. Even as words fall away, there's ways for you to connect with people in meaningful ways. So
Thank you for sharing a little bit about the impact. So we do have a question from our audience. So this one might be for you, Dr. Sheet. So this is a person that doesn't have any experience in a healthcare background, but they have started a horticulture therapy program for care partners and people living with memory loss. So we'd really like to know how they can measure that impact. How can they measure the change? So maybe they need to do that in order to get that funding.
I love that you're starting that program. I think gardening is an amazing experience for people too. So much focused on the senses, right? The smell, the touch, and movement. I would encourage you to find a partner at a local university or college who has some research experience. It can be challenging to do a good evaluation. And we're not talking here about research, but really evaluating the impact of your program on participants. So on a small scale, when we did the research on the Voices in Motion Choir, we were bringing people in for cognitive assessments and gait measurements and intensive surveys like every month, like 4 to 5 times, 6 times, 7 times a year. You can't do that kind of thing, of course, but on a smaller scale, you can definitely reach out, find some faculty member who's interested in aging and collaborate with them, because it's through collaborations that you can really create a much better evaluation if you don't have that experience yourself. Thank you for that question.
I actually do know a person that's actually doing that at Laurier. So the person might be good to contact me, so that way I can get in touch, connect the two, and help with that.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great, John. If you can connect with me and share that information, that'd be great. We could pass it on to the person that asked the question. Thank you very much. So that's been a really fruitful discussion. Thank you. We appreciate that. So just for your information, so today's event recording will be posted to the Alzheimer's Society of Canada Dementia Talks event page. You can also follow us on social media to be alerted when the recording is ready, and for news about the next webinar. So the next webinar will be November 23rd, and it's actually on arts and dementia, so kind of following along and connecting with this topic here. We also encourage you to follow Brain Canada on social media. So my colleagues will post links, social media links to Brain Canada and also the Alzheimer's Society social media channels, along with some other resources about sort of how you can stay connected. All that information will be in our chat. So lastly, a survey will be sent out to everybody that registered. So we do appreciate your feedback that way. But if you prefer, you can always send us feedback you might have about this webinar or any of the other series that we've already had. So you can send your feedback to research@alzheimer.ca. So again, I want to thank our panelists today. Some really great discussion there and helpful tips for people living with dementia and care partners. So we appreciate that, and we thank you all for attending today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.